as I mentioned, May is American Pacific. Asian American Pacific Heritage Month. I saw something today on Johanna Hayes' website with an extended version, which is something like Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian Heritage Month. On these things, if we call it one thing and someone else calls it another thing, as I've said before, one of the important lines of demarcation here is either you're trying or you're not trying. So if I say something and I leave some group out, it is not for lack of caring. It's just because as we become more and more inclusive, there are more acronyms to learn. So I am delighted to welcome to Justice Southbury Mika Yamamoto, who started working at my office a couple of weeks ago. And when I said to her, by the way, this is what I do every Sunday, and I bet you have an interesting perspective having grown up in Minnesota as a Norwegian/Japanese person. I bet you have some interesting things to say. Would you come and say them? And she said she would. So please welcome to Justice Southbury, Mika Yamamoto.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I'm here to share my story, and I hope that it can make a difference in any small way. My name is Mika Martha Yamamoto, but most people call me Mika. I was born in Tokyo, Japan in the early 1970s. My father was Japanese. Our family is from the Kyushu area, which is the southernmost island of Japan. He met my American mom, who is almost 100% Norwegian, at a Western-style university in Tokyo, where her father, my grandfather, was teaching biology. The family had moved to Japan from Iowa, so she attended the university where he was teaching. Her brother, my uncle, went to junior high or middle school at an international school, and my grandmother did missionary work for the Lutheran Church. I was given my middle name Martha after her, and we shared a very special bond. When I was still a baby, my parents divorced, and I moved to the Midwest with my mom and big sister. We settled in a smallish town of about 20,000 in southeastern Minnesota, only a 2-hour drive from Grandma's house in Iowa. Mom worked at the public library and raised my sister and me. She never remarried. We spent our summers at Grandma's, and my mom would visit on the weekends, which were some of the best days of my childhood. My dad lived in the Chicago area from when I was about 6 until about 12. So my sister and I were able to spend some time with him during those years. He moved back to Japan when my grandfather passed, and I had very limited contact with him from that point forward. Mom lived in Japan for almost 13 years, and she spoke Japanese fluently. She was a Japanese art history major for her undergraduate degree, so my sister and I were always exposed to Japanese food, art, and culture, even when we were in America. I never learned to speak Japanese, only some words and phrases. My grandma taught me about the Norwegian American immigrant culture, how to speak Norwegian from an early age, cooking traditional foods, and even getting me scholarships from the Sons of Norway to immersive summer language camp. We went all out for the Nordic Fest, an annual summer festival where the entire town converts into a celebration of a Norwegian American culture. Grandma founded a museum dedicated to Norwegian immigrants. I also watched her teach English as a second language to Hmong refugees that were resettled in her town. Grandma showed me how to respect everyone with kindness and service, and how much we can learn from others' cultures and traditions. I have always felt both Japanese and Norwegian in my body and spirit. My best friend in high school called me a Japawegian, and we crack up. She was 100% Norwegian, like with an umlaut in her first name and everything. I've always been proud of both sides of my family's heritage and culture. So that was to give you some context for the what are you part of my talk. You can see from my appearance that I'm mixed. My eye and hair color are lighter in tone and texture than my older sisters. She had very dark brown eyes and darker brown, closer to black hair that was thicker and coarser. That being said, we looked very similar, and sometimes people thought we were twins, especially in our late teens and early 20s. Mom had blonde hair and blue eyes, so we didn't really look a lot like her at first glance. The town we grew up in at the time was very homogeneous. The most diversity was if you were Scandinavian or European, Protestant or Catholic. There were a few black families, a few other Asian kids that had all been adopted, and a handful of international refugee families. My sister and I looked different than most of our classmates, enough that we were frequently confronted with it in various ways. The first day of school was a bit stressful for me, the teacher calling out names for the roll call alphabetically, so I knew it was coming. Mike Yamamoto? And I'd raise my hand and say, "It's Mika." They assumed the spelling was a typo because it was the first time ever seeing my name. On the outside, I wished my name was just Jennifer or Susan or something normal. I wanted to be me, but not stick out and feel the need to explain or define myself constantly. I remember once, my sister and I wanted to get a snack at the bakery. I think I was about 4 or 5, so she would have been about 7 or 8. We were hanging out with Mom at work at the library, which after Grandma's house was basically our third home. And so she gave us some money to go get something to eat. We walked the block and a half to the downtown bakery. And I remember holding her hand and looking up at the rows of the glass display cases of Tasty Delights and the shelves and the racks behind the lady at the counter. I was trying to decide what to get, sprinkled donut or one of those applesauce amazing spice muffins, when the lady in the greenish smock and brown beehive in a hairnet leaned over the counter and said, "Oh, how cute are you two? You must be adopted." My sister said, "No," in a bit of a confused voice. I'm just holding her hand and wondering what's going on here, no longer thinking of what I want to eat. Lady then said, Oh, well, I guess you're in a foster home." With a bit more concern/pity tone in her voice, Big Sis replied, "No." Again, still kind of confused. Lady then decided only option left was, "Aha, so you're visiting relatives from out of town then." And that is when my sister lost her patience a little and said, "No, we live with our mom who works at the library down the street." I think at that point, the lady stopped the family history info session and got us our muffins. I honestly don't remember what I ate, only the barrage of questions from an adult that made me feel uncomfortable. As I got older, and not always with my sister, I was often confronted with the "what are you" dialogue when meeting new people, or even random strangers like cashiers or other shoppers, public transportation, or maybe waiting in line at the DMV. Often playing out something like this. Curious person asks me, "What are you?" And depending on my patience, because of course I know they just want to hear part Japanese, I might reply, "A person," or "A girl," or "A student." I have infinite answers in this category. After a few more, "No, what are you?" Curious person will often say, "You know what I mean. I'm," insert German, Irish with some whatever on my dad's side. "What are you?" At that point, I will usually tell them my ethnicity just to get them to go away. But if they seem really not nice and probably not dangerous, I'll say, "None of your business," or "Why do you need to know?" And that usually will finish the conversation. However, somehow I come off as the rude and disrespectful person in their mind. That is, if I allow myself to judge them based on our brief interaction. Sometimes after people hear that I'm half Japanese, they continue to make assumptions about my personal history and life. "Your last name is Yamamoto? Oh, you must be. Or are you related to General Yamamoto from World War II?" My reply to that one is, "Yamamoto is the Smith of Japan. I have no idea." And my inside voice is saying, "Do you ask people with the last name of Osborne if they're related to the King of Darkness? Noted." The other one is, of course, "Your dad must have been a soldier, and he met your mom while serving overseas." So sometimes I get to explain my entire family history to satisfy someone's curiosity about my appearance and to put to bed their preconceived notions about how mixed-race children are born. It can be truly exhausting. Rick asked me to speak to you and come up with something to put in the announcement. I titled this talk, "What Are You? Practicing Grace in a World of Unintended Microaggressions." Recently, I've learned a new word, microaggression. I finally realized that scenarios like the bakery lady in my past fit what I have come to understand that word to mean. I know that if we can define something, we can begin to understand it, which is the hopeful step to any meaningful change. I choose to use unintended because folks like the bakery lady don't realize that their friendly curiosity about my personal information can be intrusive and offensive. You really can get to know someone and learn more about their family history without making them feel uncomfortable. I'm lucky in my life that I have not experienced direct violence or assault, other than verbal, because of my ethnicity. I don't feel comfortable shaming the kids that did slant eyes and hurtful sing-songs on the playground, or even my high school girlfriend who called me a racial slur as a joke, but used one for another Asian group since I guess we're all the same. No, those were more macro in their aggressions, mistakes of bad judgment of children in the past, who hopefully learned at least to not say those things out loud anymore. And we've all said things, especially as children, that we'd like to take back. I'm addressing the insatiable curiosity that some have when they meet someone who's different. Maybe it's how they look, or who they love. Maybe it's their adaptive device, or how they're dressed. It truly can be anything. I have learned that sometimes your curiosity should be unsatisfied. Sometimes it's better to not know because you do not need to know. I am practicing grace, as Grandma taught me, trying to maintain respect for myself and others, and to help when possible. Practicing because often I fail and lose my patience with intolerance and ignorance. Grace because it is something that is given to all of us, the gift of existence in this amazing life, full of possibilities and chances to love one another. Thank you for listening and for practicing your grace by listening to me today.